Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast. Now, I have recently been approached by, I think it's T Republic, who pretty much said if I can upload designs for merchandise for the podcast, they will turn it into a whole heap of merchandise and manage the shipping, etc. So today, I'm going to be building my own little store at the end of recording this interview. But if anyone out there is a designer on the platform already and want to add your own Tech Talks Daily inspired designs, please let me know. Maybe we can work together and prove that tech works best when it brings people together. So send me a quick email to techblogwriter@outlook.com. DM me on social, which is always at Neil C. Hughes, whether it's Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, or even Clubhouse. All the usual suspects. So let me know if you'd like a little bit more information on that. And if you're not a designer, I'd love to know the kind of designs or ideas you would have for merchandise for this podcast. No matter where you listen in the world, I need your ideas. Now, today's guest is Ido Gino, CEO of RapidAPI, the world's largest API marketplace where over 1 million developers find and connect to thousands of public APIs. And today we're going to be talking about the growth of the API economy through the pandemic and beyond. And for those of you that don't know, the API economy refers to the set of business models and practices that enables the exchange of value between consumers and providers, all through APIs. And if you're thinking, well, that's great, Neil, but why should I care? Well, hopefully, if you stick with me for the next 25 minutes, you'll have all the answers and much more. So buckle up and hold on tight so I can beam your ears all the way to San Francisco today so we can speak with Ido Gino, CEO of RapidAPI. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Yeah. So hi, and thanks for having me on the show. My name is Ido. I am the CEO and founder of a company called RapidAPI. And what RapidAPI is first and foremost, we're an API marketplace. So helping developers who are building applications and building software discover and connect to APIs that are going to help them as part of that process and help them accelerate that developer lifecycle. And then also distributing that platform in the enterprise and helping larger companies kind of make sense of their internal APIs and aid their developers in accelerating the development internally.
And it does feel like we're living in the age of the API now. And just to set the scene, though, for people listening, we will have people listening inside the industry and outside the industry to get everyone on the same page. Can you define for me exactly what is the API economy?
Yeah, so I guess to even take maybe a step backwards from that, just to kind of start with what is an API, right? I tend to talk about them or think about APIs as building blocks for software. So if you think about any sort of application that you use, it has a lot of different little functions that run inside it. So think, for instance, of an app like Uber, right? So you need to be able to show a map with where the user is and where all the different cars are. So mapping. You need to be able to send them a push notification or a text notification when the car is coming. You need to be able to charge their credit card. And those are just three examples. There are so many different functions that go into building an application like that. Now, in the past, what you'd have to do is actually go and build all these different functions from scratch. So you'd have to build the mapping functionality yourself. You'd have to actually contract with the banks and the credit card networks and build the credit card processing mechanism yourself, build the text messaging or push notification infrastructure yourself. And all of that would take a lot of time and cost a lot of money in development. And what APIs are, they're basically companies or services that wrap these functionality as a service and give you a way to connect to that as a developer. So I can find an API that gives me text messaging, for instance, and I can just tell that API, I need to send a text message to this writer that their car will be there in 5 minutes. And that API, that company actually takes care of contacting, T-Mobile or Verizon or whatever network you're running on, getting and making sure that text message is sent. And similarly with a credit card processing, instead of having to run a secure server and work with MasterCard and Visa and American Express and do all the credit card verification, and all the kind of logic that goes around that, I can just work with an API company that does that. I'll give them the credit card number. I'll give them the details of the transaction. They'll take care of the rest. And what it means for a developer or a company is that instead of spending months and quarters building all those little functions and investing in huge teams to maintain them, you can just connect to those APIs, plug them into your application, and get up and running a lot faster.
And for the business leaders that are listening, when it comes to APIs and the API economy, why is it so important for businesses, or what would you say to those business leaders listening, just to hammer home that point that we're making here?
Yeah, so I think there are two angles or two sides that I would take on that. The first one is looking at it more from the perspective of leveraging APIs. So I think that understanding the power of APIing every different part of the application and exposing those APIs to developers in the company is huge. And a lot of companies are realizing now, if you want to empower developers in your organizations, you want to let them be more effective and be able to innovate and create more software faster, giving them access to all the different data sets and all the different functionality that the company's already built is crucial to that. And the way to do that is through exposing APIs. So thinking about APIs as a way to allow developers to be more productive and accelerate development is one big part of it. And I think that especially in a time like now, where we see the need to innovate quickly and respond quickly with all the changes happening in the world with new digital solutions, offering that agility and building that speed and that pace of innovation into the development organization is huge. So that's one aspect. So thinking more about exposing APIs and leveraging APIs internally. But the other part is we see more and more companies actually going down the route of exposing APIs to their partners, to their customers, and to their developer community as a whole, and thinking about that as a way to generate more revenue and create new revenue streams as a company, but also as a way to think about how to lock in your customers and offer deeper integrations into your product. So thinking about creating an external-facing API strategy and offering more and more APIs to your customers and partners is another huge aspect that I think should be top of mind for a lot of business leaders today.
And as someone working right in the heart of the industry, you've seen all the changes and a lot of big movements going on at the moment in the industry. What kind of investments are you seeing being made in the API economy? Is there anything that springs to mind there?
Yeah, I think from a lot of the larger companies that we work with, and just to give the context on that, we partner with a lot of larger enterprise companies that are thinking about standing up their internal API platforms. So both enabling internal sharing and collaboration around APIs, but also exposing those APIs externally, which to my previous point, enabling their customers and partners to connect to their APIs. And we're seeing a lot of companies, especially in the last couple of years, doubling down on their API investments as part of a broader digital strategy, right? So, one example that I have, and I can't name the company here, but it's one of the largest banks in North America. And they actually had a whole strategy around completely getting rid of all their physical presence, so the branches and the physical locations in the next 10 years, and move everything towards digital. And for them, APIing and relying on APIs to accelerate their software development was a pretty critical part of getting towards that vision. And for that reason, they made a multi-million-dollar investment in their API platforming and bolstering up their API strategy.
And I think it's important to highlight that RapidAPI is one of the world's largest API marketplaces, where over 1 million developers find and connect to thousands of public APIs. But can you tell me more about how developers are not just using APIs to connect to apps and services, but how they're using them to build new digital business models and services to ultimately drive innovation? Because I think that is such a hot topic right now, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think a lot of it goes to the point of, if you think about a company, so let's say you work for, again, take the example of a big bank, and you want to innovate. So you want to create a new digital service, you want to create a new delivery mechanism for banking services, or even you want to connect into new solutions. So like voice assistants, Alexa, wearables, any sort of new digital solution that you want to offer. Oftentimes what we find is internally the biggest challenge is just getting access to all the different systems. So you need access to the account information. You need access to payroll information. You need access to balance and transaction data. So getting access to all of those different systems is going to be the biggest hurdle for you as a developer trying to innovate internally. And APIs have the ability to simplify all of that access and make the life for that developer a lot easier, so they can focus on just creating the new experience and creating the new digital asset, and not on working through internal politics and trying to get access to all the different assets.
And I do think that the unsung heroes of many organisations and big brands are developers. And I do think that they are finally getting some of the appreciation that they deserve. But can you tell me more about how companies can further transform their businesses by actually empowering their developers?
Yeah, and I think to your point, it's especially in the last year when almost every business had to transform a lot of what they do in light of COVID, in light of physical presence or the ability to go to physical locations changing, the ability to innovate quickly and move towards digital, moving towards online experiences, it kind of stopped being a nice to have and started being a fundamental need. And the one example that I always give on that, across the street from where I live, there is a Starbucks, and yeah, they always had a mobile app and the ability to order ahead, but that was a pretty small percentage of their business. All of a sudden, in one bright day, lockdown in California, the only way for them to do business is through the mobile app ordering, because they're not allowed to let people into the store. So they had to literally transform from maybe a few percentages of mobile ordering to 100% overnight. And that's just one example. Think of every cinema, every entertainment company, every store that didn't have an e-commerce platform, or didn't really invest in that e-commerce part of their business. Suddenly, all of these digital experiences became 100% of their business. So really, the only way to do that is with empowering developers to move quickly. And for those developers to move quickly, they have to have easy reliance and easy access to existing services, because you can't go and build everything from scratch. And the way to do it is by enabling them access to those APIs.
And I think it was Microsoft that said last year that there was something like 3 years of digital transformation that ended up being squeezed into 3 or 4 months there. So I think there's so many businesses chasing that digital transformation now and understanding that it is a journey, not a destination. So how does RapidAPI help developers and their organizations accelerate those digital transformation efforts?
Yeah, and it's funny that you bring in Microsoft, because there was actually a quote, I think it was a couple of years ago at the Microsoft Build conference. So a quote by Satya, the CEO of Microsoft, where he actually said that they, as an organization, one of their most important priorities is APIing every layer and creating APIs interfaces and exposing them for every function and every data set that they own as an organization. And that approach of creating an API layer on top of everything that you do as a business is not something that they were even the first to do. So, another big Seattle company called Amazon has actually been famous for creating APIs and driving an API first strategy internally. And there is a famous memo that Jeff Bezos actually sent to the whole team at Amazon a few years ago, where he said, everything we do, everything we build, every data set we have, there has to be an API on top of it, accessible to other developers in the company. And then he even signs off and says, if you don't do this, you'll be fired. So this is how importantly he sees APIs internally. So I think that the best thing that organizations can do is cultivate that API platform internally, making sure that everything they build has an API in front of it that is very easily integratable by developers, in order to enable them to easily access those services, integrate them, and create new digital products and experiences on top of them.
And I'm curious, what do you see with API adoption among your customers? Are there any trends that you're noticing? Are there any use cases that you can share without revealing any names, obviously?
Yeah, I think, broadly speaking, there are 3 main trends that we're seeing right now. In terms of how companies are thinking about their API strategy. The first one is a pretty large-scale growth in the number of these APIs. And we see this, both from our own customers when we just track the scope of their APIs internally, but also from developer surveys that we and other companies are running. I think that 10, 12 years ago, you talk to a company, if they have 10 APIs, they would be a big, massive API player. Now you repeatedly see, especially with larger organizations, hundreds to thousands of APIs being the norm, right? So the sheer number of these APIs is growing. And as part of that, they're also no longer produced or managed by one team, but virtually every team and every unit in the company produces their APIs. So that's trend number one, just the sheer number of APIs is exploding. The second trend that we're looking at is also where those APIs reside is changing. So it used to be, you have a single data center or a single cloud deployment, and all of your APIs and all of your workloads live within that. But increasingly, what we're seeing with companies is they're actually running, a lot of them still have a data center or an on-prem environment that they're running, but they also have a cloud environment, and they also have a service mesh, and they also have serverless, and developers keep deploying on new environments and new models. So now you have APIs running in a lot of different environments. So more variety in how they're deployed. And then also, and this gets a little technical, but the languages or the formats that those APIs are exposed in is also becoming a lot more varied. And some of the keywords that you're going to hear there are GraphQL, Kafka, Async API, WebSockets, a lot of new technologies. And they're really sort of like a renaissance now with innovation on the format and the structure of those APIs. So you get a lot more variety on that sense too. So, if you kind of look at the free trends, a lot more APIs running in a lot of different places with a lot of different formats or structures to them. So definitely, when you look at those organizations and the way they're adopting APIs, it's becoming a lot more varied and a lot more complex to manage.
And like you said, there has been so many changes over the last 12 months. So I'm going to ask you to look into your virtual crystal ball here and ask, what's next for the API economy, and what role do you see RapidAPI playing in this future as trends continue to evolve?
Yeah, I just need to get some dust off my crystal ball. It's been in the attic for a little too long. I think, the big thing, and you actually called it out yourself as well earlier, that companies are realizing now is the developers have more power and more ability to make decisions, and organizations are actually striving to empower them and give them the ability to innovate, give them the ability to work on their own track, and actually valuing the tools and the design choices that those developers make. So I think that looking forward, we're just going to see an increasing amount of power or amount of control given to those developers in the organizations, in and around APIs, but also more broadly. And business leaders following a lot. And business leaders basically doing two things: A, working hard to enable their developers and investing a lot in tools that enable them to move faster. Because again, they recognize the importance of digital transformation. They recognize the importance of the online economy, and they want to enable their developers to move fast as part of that. But also a lot of those design choices, a lot of the tooling choices are going to be influenced by what those developers bring to the table. So I think that we're already seeing some signs of both these things. But looking forward, I definitely see that happening a lot. And I think it's also part of a broader context where, as you said, we saw 3 years of digital transformation happening virtually overnight, but it's not something that's going to roll back. It's just an acceleration of a process that's happening. And these are definitely going to be part of that process that's happening and accelerating now.
Completely agree with you there. And for anyone listening that would like to dig a little bit deeper on any of the topics we discussed today, what's the best way of finding you guys online and equally contacting your team if they've got any questions?
Yeah, so rapidapi.com is our website. You can go on there, see all the different services that we offer. Also head up to rapidapi.com/marketplace. That is our API marketplace where you can see all the different APIs available and offered through RapidAPI. And on there, you should have the team page and the ability to reach out to anybody on the team from all the different functions that we have.
Well, there's so much I've loved about our conversation today, from talking about the role of the developer in the digital transformation, empowering developers. I think that's what it's all about right now. So a big thank you for taking the time to sit down with me today and share your story. Thank you.
Yeah, likewise. And thanks for having me.
Like I said early in the episode, it does feel like we're living in the age of APIs at the moment. But it was great to hear of how we can connect software together, evolve and expand businesses, all with minimal cost. And there are various business models around APIs that enable companies to grow their revenue through APIs. For example, Salesforce connecting to Marketo, Lyft to financial payment APIs, etc. And by driving technology, you can create software faster. So many big talking points, but obviously this is not my area of expertise. That's why we get a guest on every day. So I'd love to hear more about your thoughts about everything we talked about today. And if there's anything you would like to add to the conversation, whether it be a comment, whether you'd like to come on the podcast, whatever it may be, please email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com, tweet me, get me on Instagram, LinkedIn, all the usual suspect at Neil C. Hughes. And my website is techblogwriter.co.uk. But I'm going to concentrate on trying to build that merchandise store now. Remember, let me know if you've got any ideas for designs you would like to see or you would like to help with. And I will be waiting for you in your podcast feed again tomorrow. So a big thank you for listening. And until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.